because I can see, even I see a few names here that are familiar, but there's also people that I don't know joining, and I want to just start off by giving a bit of an introduction to Way. And Way is 15 years old, and for me, it was a bit of a birth when I started it of me taking my own agency in life and in building a practice. And all of that was based on my sense of responsibility to want to, for myself, take responsibility for how I show up. And for that required a lot of grow up work as well, and self-awareness, and wanted to invite others on that journey. And here we are 15 years later, and I'm excited that we are now really initiating some of that work in context of what it is to be a woman in this world and taking responsibility for how we show up. And it would never come to be this way in this context, likelihood in this, without Shay having joined the practice and really having a really heartfelt, deep passion around wanting to bring this voice to others and to experience this together. And so today we're going to be exploring that in the beginning of a journey. And I want to invite Shay and introduce her to you as a woman of all things in every nature, a woman as a mother, a daughter, a wife, a leader, and many other roles that she shows up to in this world. And I found it ironic when I was thinking about wanting to introduce her. I just before this about a half an hour ago, I went to ChatGPT, and I was like, knowing she is living in Texas and she has some also connections to Georgia, being a woman really born and living in the South, I put in there is define a woman from Southern United States. And I kid you not, this is what came up: homemaking, childcare, supporting family, community involvement, limited professional opportunities. Like, that's verbatim. So I love that we're coming here together to really want to explore that there's still so much work to be done. And I'm excited that Shay's inviting us to come together on this. So I'll pass it over to you, Shay.
Thank you so much. And Donna, I loved that introduction, though it stabbed me in the heart a bit. I still quite enjoyed that. I do want to thank everyone for being here with us today. And I really want to share the spirit of what our WAYward Women series is all about as we get into this and then start to get into some of the context of what we're sharing today. But really, this is about, as Donna said, raising our self-awareness as women and making sure we're leveraging the genius and the strengths that we have within us in the right way for us to advance in our goals. And also, and a big part of what today is challenging conventional thinking and narratives that might limit us, even though we may not know it. Sometimes narratives on their face are well-meaning, well-intended, and they can be good advice. But when we default to these positions, which we sometimes do as women, they can absolutely sometimes stand in our way. Now, we're doing this with the purpose of lighting a fire within the group here to see how we can flip these narratives and really use them to our advantage. We do want to say that what Donna and I are sharing today, we're not speaking in absolutes. We understand there is context and more things to consider, but we're just unpacking these narratives and ideals in a way, again, to keep us on a path that helps us achieve our goals. So no matter where we've heard this advice from, either a well-meaning authority figure, or some social media influencer, or just a story we heard around the campfire, we've all heard these types of things. And again, they'll be familiar, but we're going to unpack them a little bit in detail. So the first narrative that I hear quite a bit and advice we receive is I have to work hard and I have to work harder than everyone else to get that promotion, right? We've been told this, we think this, we embody this, especially as women. We do a lot of work. We take on a lot of responsibility. So it makes sense that this is part of our conscious or unconscious narrative that we may have in our minds. But when we think about it, we need to realize, and this came from my experience in working in programs in corporate America. And sorry, I didn't start with that. Again, these are insights from our experiences as we've been through this. We've been here, done this, right? So I was introduced to a concept in my career called pie. There was a IBM executive who left and became an author and a consultant, and he coined this term pie. When you look at it, right, it's kind of makes everybody go back a little bit and say, wow, my performance is only 10% of what it takes for me to achieve my goals in my career. Now, when people see, me say that it's a myth that we have to work hard, they get a little bit nervous because I'm not minimizing the role of performance in our jobs. We all do have to perform, but I am encouraging us to not sit around and depend on our performance or depend on our tenure in any situation to get us that advancement or promotion or opportunity that we're looking for, because a lot of times we'll be waiting for a pretty long time if we do that. I can't imagine, or I can't recall a time where someone worked their butt off from the time the lights came on to the time they went off, and some big wig recognized that and said, hey, such a hard worker, I'm going to give that person a promotion to director that I was about to open up, right? We typically see something else. So going back to our pie model, while 10% of it is reflected in our performance, you can see here the other 30% of it really focuses on our image, right? This is why you hear so many people talking about building and the importance of building our personal brands, right? This is more of, when we use the term brand, though, sometimes we think about big, flashy, making it look good. No, that's not all that a brand is about. How do people receive us? How do people perceive us in the workplace as well? Do people like working with me? Am I authentic? All of those things go into building our image in the workplace. Again, so with performance and image, that's 40%. A whopping 60% of our career pie is based around exposure. That's having exposure to the right opportunities, to the right people in order to advance our career forward. Now, this is great advice, but I feel like there's a piece of it missing from our IBM Smarty Pants executive guide. And in my experience, I had to also be willing to raise my hand. I had many times applied for roles that no one had thought of me for. And I literally raised my hand and said, hey, I would like to do that if you'd like to give me a chance. And that has worked out very well for me just about every one of those times. So raising our hand is an important part of this one, but raising our hands for the right things, right, is the most important part of it as well. So I'm going to ask Donna question here. And Donna, I would love for you to share a little more insight when it's important for us to raise our hand versus when it's potentially not the best idea for us to raise our hands.
Yeah, that's a topic that I'm passionate about, I would say. And it, not just from my own experience, I guess, of in my earlier years, thinking raising my hand meant being highly supportive in any role and way which I could be. I was the first to put my hand up to take notes in a meeting. I was the first to put my hand up to do anything that required, an ask, really. I wasn't very discerning about what I was putting my hand up for. I just wanted to genuinely be supportive of whatever was trying to come to life. And over time, I started to recognize and observe, wait a minute, why is it that in every meeting, and I don't think this is a shock to anyone here, that, we put our hands up for almost all things. It's part, I got to imagine the story I make up for myself is that's a lot of that is culturally driven, that we will be supportive in any role that we are in. So we will put our hands up with that level of humility to be able to do it. So what I'm inviting here, and what I've always invited to people when I'm coaching them one-on-one and try to practice on my own, is that I'm very conscious and intentional about when I raise my hand. And I differentiate that from what might be expected of me, and actually maybe even be a little provocative in changing some of that if I'm observing it happening in any space where we are anticipating that women are going to, not just take notes, but also do all the follow-ups, more of the implementation of work than actually just showing up and raising your hand for things that are really passionately driven for you, things you care about, things that really matter to you.
I love that. Thank you for that insight. So of course, with that in mind, we shift that narrative, right? And we're able to know how to gauge, what performance is in a more meaningful way. And so that will go into our second narrative. Let's see. Oh, everything needs to be perfect or I'll be exposed. This is one of the 5 types of imposter syndrome called the perfectionist. Someone that has to make sure everything is perfect, because if it's not perfect, they're a fake, they're a fraud, they've gotten to where they are because of a fluke and failure. Another version for someone who's called the expert imposter is, oh, I don't know everything about this topic I'm about to present on. Oh my gosh, I'm going to be exposed, right? Each one of the 5 types of imposter syndrome personalities have a different variation of this type of statement. And we're not alone. 75% of executive women have reported that they have imposter syndrome at one point or another. And, I think we are constantly, as women, trying to live up to ideals of what men expect, what some other women expect, and even, some memes and social media posts. There's a lot going on. Now, while we don't have time to go into each type of imposter, we can break these down just a little bit more. So the first thing I do want to say here is that, seriously, stop. Nobody, and I mean nobody, likes perfect people. Think about it in your mind whenever you think of about someone who's perceived as being perfect. Oh, that's Sally. She's so perfect with the perfect hair and her perfect kids and her perfect car, right? There is with that, and knowing how people feel about perfect people, we still have the desire to always be perfect, which doesn't necessarily always serve us in reaching our goals. You're not an imposter. It is actually okay to be vulnerable and make mistakes, right? There's a lot of people who are terrified of mistakes. And it is certainly important for us to be okay with it. It's also okay if we're not the smartest person in every room that we go into. As a marketing executive over the past 15 years or so, often made it a point to not be the smartest person in the room when it came to my job as a marketer, because I wanted to have the standpoint of someone who wasn't so entrenched in this and who could be curious and ask questions. Sometimes I'm pretty sure I asked some dumb questions, but if they weren't asked, we don't ever make those types of discoveries. And it never diminished my role as a leader in any way, shape, or form. Because I am a big believer, one of my personal philosophies is to be serious about what I do, but never serious about myself. And that has been one of the most important things in my life in making sure that I don't suffer from imposter syndrome. Now, so with that, Donna, I'm gonna, let's see, as a coach of professional women and from your experiences as well, can you share more about how we explore the last part of this, right? We talk about the superhuman need to have perfect work-life balance. So I would like for you to dig a bit into what we like to use instead, which is work-life harmony, and what that looks like.
Sure. And I know you have a follow-up quote to this that is going to show up, but I'll share first from my own experience, which is that uh, I used to feel a little bit of shame in my lack of polish in my way of showing up. And I couldn't feel more different from that now, where I'm actually very proud of and feel that that's what I take agency in, is that anything that is polished is, it starts to be have an essence of being done or complete, or even quite honestly just unrelatable. For me, what I think of, you know, perfection, I'm not admiring that. I actually question it. Whereas when I see anything that's authentic or vulnerable based, I am absolutely inspired and I feel drawn to that. So the whole idea of being able to be real, be showing up as yourself, and in as many ways as you can, just own. I think most of us, I take pride actually more in the mistakes that I've made than the accomplishments. Those are the chapters that got me to where I am today and feeling proud of it. And the other part that I feel like when I think about as a coach, so many people start out, when I've asked them, like, what are some of their aspirations in doing the work? And it's to create a healthy life balance. And yet I feel that that being the goal in itself is a consequence. It's not a thing. That comes from taking agency in who you are, and moving your eye away from being a mastery of everything and being all that you already are. We are already fully whole, human, and beautiful and wonderful in all of our ways, with many things to grow. And so we take notes from Mother Nature and notice that things bloom and they blossom and they also die off. And they do all of these beautiful things in the process of it. And just being naturally who we are is what is being asked of us. And I think that's the shift in focus. While that might sound altruistic, it's a real thing. We need to show up whole to inspire other people to be whole and really own what that looks like.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And you made me remember, curiosity, right, is a leadership quality that is very underrated. People appreciate a curious leader. And when we approach a situation from the standpoint of perfection and being an expert and being a superhuman, again, sometimes that doesn't allow for that leadership quality of curiosity to come through. So for me, this is one of the most important things for us as women to get past, right? This level of feeling like an imposter, and we don't know everything, and we can't be everything, and we can't this and we can't that. I'm not enough. I'm even too much, right? All those things are limiting, and really looking for how we're adjusting this narrative as we have here is super important. So our next narrative, that again, well-meaning advice, it's one of my favorites. Stay in your lane. You don't want to step on any toes. If I had $1 for every time I heard that, or something like Sally needs to stay in her lane, a variation of this might sound something like, when it comes to our higher ups and dealing with them, we'll hear, oh, when you're talking to the boss, keep the rose-colored glasses on. The boss doesn't like when we point out problems. He just wants solutions, right? Now, if we keep the analogy of lanes going, right? Imagine this. What happens in traffic if we remain solely in our lane on a long journey? Our careers are a long journey, right? We stay solely in our lane. Maybe there's a bad accident up ahead blocking our lane. I'll just sit here until that lane clears up. Is that what we do? No, we get out of our lane, right? Sometimes something could be in the road obstructing us, so we have to swerve out of our lane very quickly, right? It's a simple analogy, but it's the same thing when we think about our careers. Roads have dotted lines for a reason. They're meant to be navigated in a way where we can maneuver as needed. Now, if you don't listen to anything I say in any of this webinar, the one thing I will scream from the rooftops is the fear of pissing people off will hold you back. Why are we so scared to disrupt? Again, for me personally, I get nervous when everybody likes me. If everybody likes me, I'm not disrupting enough. I'm not asking enough questions. I'm not challenging enough. So when it gets quiet and everybody's like, "Ooh, I love that shit," I'm like, "Ooh, I need to go do something important," right? But that's just the nature of who I am. And I'm not saying that's the nature of who you need to be. We can absolutely disrupt in a purposeful way by practicing something called radical candor. The truth is powerful, but we do need to check in on that. As Donna said earlier, when it came to raising our hands for things, the same when swerving out of our lane, is this something that I care enough about? Do I mean what I'm saying? Can I defend what I'm saying? And can I say it thoughtfully? That's the process one of my favorite authors and speakers goes through whenever she disrupts. And I think that's certainly important here. We don't necessarily want to just throw out and lob truth bombs and call out problems, right? Yes, leaders love problem solvers. They don't love problem identifiers so much. And I think when we hear people say, "Oh, boss doesn't like to hear about problems," it's because, yes, there are a lot of problem identifiers out there, not necessarily a ton of problem solvers. So that is just, again, a little bit of the shift in the mindset. And for us as leaders, remember, leadership can be from different perspectives. Just because we might identify / want to be part of solving a problem, it doesn't mean we have to be the one to do it. We can lead from the front, we can lead from the side, we can lead from behind. Don't pile on the work if we don't have the space, but step up if you can, right, in a meaningful way. So Donna, as we process this one, can you tell us a little bit more about that concept of radical candor that I mentioned? Because it might sound a little scary to someone that's not really familiar with it.
Absolutely. And it's funny because as recently as this morning, we were unpacking the idea of being disruptive, and not necessarily context of as a woman, yet I feel that it's very much there, right? And it's like when we
Right.
think about that, I want to lead into that, is there's disruptive, and actually if you look at the etymology of the word and where it came from, it was really it was being able to challenge something enough to create something new. And so if you start to change your own narrative around what it means to challenge something, and to know the difference between being disruptive, where you don't actually care about maybe anything other than being right, then yeah, you know what? That's actually not going to bring much good to life. If it's that you genuinely care and are passionate about something, that you are actually responsible for challenging the space enough to bring something to conversation. And that is disruptive in a beautiful way. If you, again, I used earlier the analogy of nature. Nature is constantly disrupting itself because something anew is about to come out through the earth and be and grow and be born. So this idea that, and I have my own story that from when we look at it from a woman's perspective, and so many women that I've talked to with this, is that there's something that feels a little bit mean almost, or non-supportive or uncaring about disagreeing or challenging. And that in of itself is so limiting, because aren't those the ways that you've learned everything that you've learned in life? And isn't it that you would want in reverse that somebody would challenge you if they saw something there that needed to come alive? So I'm inviting that to say, like, it's really about changing our narrative, changing our own belief systems to start with, about what being disruptive means and what challenging directly is actually creating for you and others.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Now, those were 3 examples that we've shared. Again, while well-intended advice at certain points in our careers, those represented some of the things as coaches that we hear that we're really feeling and understanding and seeing that keep women from stepping into their full power. So it's one thing to go through these in 30 minutes or so, but what do we suggest that we do about it now, right? So this work is not easy. This work takes time. Donna was and still is essentially my coach. She coached me for the last 5 years before we started working together. And this journey has been a great one. But there's some things we have to do in order to get ready for it and be able to navigate it successfully. And it's all about flipping these scripts, as we did throughout the presentation. And we can't do that without taking agency for ourselves and our own success. We are not subjects of the workplace or victims of the workplace. We should be authors of our success in our careers and really define it on our own terms. And also without some introspection to become self-aware and then self-accepting, we can't really adopt those wayward narratives as well. So that's part of the work that we stress as coaches for people to do first and foremost. And then as we navigate our lives and our workplaces, just being aware of our internal narratives, right? That's our key to busting the negative ones and really making them something that can work for us. And the part that I'm most excited about when it comes to flipping these narratives, yes, it empowers us and our paths and our journeys in the workplace, but I can't wait to abolish some of these things for the next generation of women, right? They're coming behind us. I want my 9-year-old daughter to have it easier than we had it. I don't want her to have to feel like a special group necessarily, right? So really making sure that we do this in a way that gives others permission to be authentic and wholly themselves is an important part of how we flip these narratives. Now, when I was left the executive world not too long ago, this idea was my personal catalyst, right, to want to become a coach. The women and even some men that I worked with while I was leaving, they called me just to thank me for being authentic and not being a cookie cutter version of a leader in our organization. And I was in near tears. That impact to me is what really helped me hone in on my purpose and start working with Donna. And that's what it's all about, finding all of us our purpose. We all have a purpose. We all can find ways to lean into that in each and everything that we do. So now I want to make sure that we stress we are committed to this Wayward Woman series or Wayward Women's series. We want to do things like this more often. We also want to hear from you. This is a community that we want to provide opportunities to in order to connect and engage, to provide helpful resources, whatever the case may be, but we can't do that without your engagement and your input. So we welcome you into this community of women. Now we'll roll out more events and services after the holidays, but it's really important for us to start flipping the script no matter what we do next. So we'll take a little time because we may have a little time. And Phoebe, if you can let me know if there are any questions in the chat.
Okay, can I invite something that I'd love to just
Yes,
unpack in a minute, if you will?
absolutely.
And that's because I actually had a lot of people say to me, "Wayward woman, isn't there some context? Wayward is like kind of out of control." And woo." So maybe you can just unpack the
Yes,
meaning of wayward women.
that is exactly the point. And I'm sorry, Donna, I've done it so much in the my other videos. I didn't do that with this group. But when we think about the word wayward and why we chose it, other than the cool play on wave that it has, wayward means to turn away from what is right or proper. It means to be willful or disobedient. And as soon as I read the definition, I was like, oh, hell yeah. Right? I knew what the word meant, but in reading the definition, I was like, oh, sold. Perfect. Couldn't be more perfect if we tried. But because, again, as we share in the presentation, these are things that society expects of us. If we don't turn away from them, if we don't become disobedient to them, for lack of a better word, they won't change. So, yes, we're encouraging you as women in the workplace to be wayward. And we won't, I don't see us backing down from that word or that connotation as at all. So thank you for asking that question, Donna.
And if I could just add, because when I'll share that when Schaefer shared that with me, I was like, "Ooh!" Like what I found really resonated for me. I don't know if any of you haven't, I highly recommend. I don't remember the author's name, but the Women Who Run with the Wolves book, and it really does try to help invite us as women to own that they're, wolves are known metaphorically as being these vicious animals, but they're actually not. They are the most nurturing, loving animals, and yet they just take a stand for things that are really important. And that's when we might see a side of a wolf, right? And it's kind of her whole message there is to have us own the wolf within us, and that we can be all these things that we really already are, and own them and take agency for them. So I thought it was brilliant when Shay came up with that, because I think that's exactly what wayward is embodying.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate you attending, and we will see you at the next Wayward Woman webinar.